They got all those woodlots,
Yep.
kind of old
Good
forest
evening, everyone.
savanna remnants, and
Good evening. Welcome. This is the Practical Farmers of Iowa Farminar series. Starting another live Farminar tonight with some new farmers to share some lessons with everybody and take your questions. Thank you all for being here. Practical Farmers of Iowa is a nonprofit organization that was founded by farmers and is managed by farmers. 10 of our 12 board members are farmers and have been members for many, many years, including Dan Wilson, which is the gentleman in this cool looking hat, homemade Practical Farmers of Iowa logo right there on the back of his cap. And he's at a field day last summer at beginning farmer Drew Leitz's place. There's Drew's father right behind him there, looking at adding some pork and some grazing to their farm near Pocahontas. And I wanted just to call attention to that. That's what really this night's all about, is to have a field day, a Practical Farmers of Iowa event online. So we're glad you're all joining us, and I like to think of us all joining together remotely from our computers, just like these folks are getting together on the farm to share ideas and to have some good conversations. And there's Aaron Wilson just joined us. Thank you for coming, Aaron. Just calling out your father-in-law, who's in that photo there. Great volunteer for PFI and a great supporter of farmers. Here we are in the middle of our fall farm in our series. I hope you've been having a good fall. It's a great time of year to look at business planning and think ahead for next year. And we're glad to have you join us. And we hope you can join us for the next Farminars each Tuesday evening from 7:30 to 8:30 right here online. Got some great topics coming up, including poultry next week. So we hope you can join us for some interesting discussions and maybe get some of your questions answered. We are very grateful for the tremendous amount of farmers that we have who want to be open and supportive of others and share their ideas. And this is just one example at a field day last summer with Kate Edwards, sharing her pride in being a Practical Farmers of Iowa member, as well as sharing her experiences that she's accrued as a beginning farmer. So we hope to have hear from Jay as well today from his perspective as a beginning farmer and really add that richness to our discussion. We really welcome all folks at our organization, any kind of enterprise you can imagine. We've got farmers that are doing it in Iowa in our membership, and even beyond Iowa, we're attracting folks. 10% of our members are currently from out of state. So if you're out of state member, if you're an out of state Farminar viewer, please consider joining Practical Farmers of Iowa to really avail yourself to the wealth of knowledge and get all the benefits of membership, ranging from discounts to our annual conference, special events, opportunities to direct our organization, and even to be featured in the media and be leaders in agriculture from wherever you are. We really like to point out all the nitty-gritty details of farming and really talk and analyze things and share what we're seeing, and so we can all learn together. It's really why we all came together in the 80s to come together and share ideas and help all the farms to improve. Not just one farm improves, but everybody can always improve. So that's why we still exist today, and we're rearing and gearing, ready to go for a new 25 years here. So we're into our 28th year now. I want to call attention to a couple opportunities. If you're not aware yet, we've still got a couple seats left for our next generation retreat. We have 52 folks registered to attend. A lot of great discussions will happen, including some really wonderful sessions with beginning farmer leaders, folks who are going to share their experiences with other beginners and have some really good sessions and networking opportunities. That's in Newton, Iowa. You can look at that link there for more details. If you'd like, you can register this week. We'll begin Friday morning, the Next Generation Retreat, an overnight retreat that we do every year to help beginning farmers learn from each other. Finally, I would love to have everybody that watches Farminars to be a member of Practical Farmers of Iowa. It's just a really low rate of membership, just $20 a year for students and $50 for the whole farm. Every single person in your farm can be under one umbrella membership for just $50 a year. You can also keep up with us on Facebook by joining our Facebook page there as being a fan on our Facebook page. And we hope you can learn from other farmers like Joel Winnis here in the photo up in Northeast Iowa, sharing some ideas at a grazing event this fall. So be a member of Practical Farmers of Iowa. Join the great group now, getting close to 1,000 members. It's a really wonderful time to be a member of Practical Farmers of Iowa. Jack Knight's here today. Great to see him. He's a new lifetime member. That's another category I forgot to mention. You can be a lifetime member of Practical Farmers of Iowa now for just $1,000. No more membership fees you'll ever have to pay for the rest of your life. And so let's just begin tonight with Jay and Dan and hear their discussions. I think we'll start with Jay, and I'll bring up his PowerPoint, and then we'll go to Dan, and we'll have some great discussions.
All right, well, first off, thank Practical Farmers of Iowa for allowing me to speak tonight and talk a little bit about my operation and kind of have a discussion here with Dan on some of the things that he's doing with a little more experience. I'm a fairly new farmer. I'm in the Savings Incentive Program, just about through my first year of that, and been using a lot of the tools that Practical Farmers of Iowa has provided to me, along with the savings account and the matching funds. We'll keep working on reaching our goals there. We also using the business planning tools to help develop our company here, the Big River Meat Company. Yeah, it's what I've really found with Practical Farmers of Iowa that's nice is the fact that I'm not a very big farmer by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a lot smaller farmer than even Dan is, and I don't think Dan would probably consider himself a very big farmer either. But what's nice is that it creates an open forum for people like myself that can have a few acres, doing the best you can with what you got, to someone that has 1,000 acres or 500 acres or whatever. It's a very welcoming group to people of all different kind of backgrounds and interests. So. The Big River Meat Company is a project that my wife and I started. Maybe I should go back even further than that. First off, my desire to farm started, well back into my early years, and I was very involved in producing hogs, cattle, sheep, chickens, all the way through high school. And then I went off to college at Iowa State University and graduated there in 2003 with a degree in agriculture education and a minor in agronomy. And became very interested in soils and the environment, and those are things that I was kind of near and dear to my heart growing up. So I had the great opportunity of actually obtaining an internship with NRCS, and then so far have made my full-time job career has been with NRCS, working as a resource conservationist all over the state of Iowa. I've spent some time in Fort Madison, Iowa, spent some time in Creston, Iowa, Decorah, Sioux City, Sergeant Bluff area, and then South Central Iowa down in Knoxville for about 6 years down there. And then just recently had an opportunity to move back to Northeast Iowa here and working out of the New Hampton and Charles City Floyd Chickasaw Management Unit. So that's kind of what my background is in. That's kind of where I've been, and that's what I get up every morning and have to report to work there. But it's a good job. I really enjoy it. And I get a great opportunity to meet people and learn a lot about the environment and different things that are available to people out there. So, fast forward to about a year ago, my wife and I had moved back home. We were looking for a place to buy. We'd had a number of different things. We'd registered on the Find a Farmer website with Practical Farmers of Iowa, looking for a place to kind of set some roots down. And it was kind of a weird deal because we had a farmer get in touch with, or a landowner get in touch with us about farming their land, and so we were kind of in negotiation with that, talking about that, and trying to kind of get something worked out on that. Well, in the meantime, a farm right across the river from this one actually came for sale, and kind of alerted our attention to it. And as it turned out, we ended up not getting the farm rented from the landowner that had contacted us. However, we did end up buying the farm across the river and got really lucky on that because it went through a foreclosure deal and it helped keep the price down for us. And so we ended up getting that bought. And that's a whole other story. But the good news is we got a farm. We bought a house and 80 acres. And it was a dream come true because it was really way beyond what we thought we would ever be able to do. But we were able to take advantage of the SIP program. We were able to take advantage of the beginning farmer loan program through the Farm Service Agency. And our loan officer was absolutely excellent, working with us to try and help us get on this farm. and working with us with our operating loans and stuff. So for beginning farmers out there, that's one place. And I'm going to talk a fair amount in my presentation here about different opportunities, program opportunities that you may or may not know about through the government and through different organizations that we've been able to take advantage of. So once we got that deal done, we got moved out on the farm. My wife and I said, hey, we've got all these buildings, we have a strong interest in livestock, and we need to do something out here to try and generate some more income, generate just kind of a plan, for a long-term plan for what we're going to do. And one of the things that we noticed is when we sold our first lambs this past year, our first group of lambs, I took them to the sale barn and I sold those lambs for 90 cents a pound, which 6 months earlier they were $2 a pound. So my dreams of good profits and lots of money kind of went down the tubes as I had to drive that truck and trailer to the sale barn to get rid of those lambs. What was interesting enough, though, is I had been doing a little research and found out that they were selling ground lamb in the grocery store for $8.99 a pound in Mason City. And I told my wife, I said, this is crap. I said, I'm selling these sheep for nothing. I says, and the grocery store's still getting $8.99 a pound for ground lamb. I'm like, there has to be a better way to do this. Why should the grocery store get all the profits? So we kind of developed the Big River Meat Company, and we're just getting started right now. We're just kind of getting into the rotation. We're selling halves, wholes, quarters of meat. But then what we also did is got approved through the state to sell retail cuts of meat. And we kind of developed that now that we're hoping that all of our livestock that we're raising on farm eventually will be sold privately. I won't have to make the trip to the sale barn again, I hope, and kind of take nothing for my product that I'm producing. So that's kind of the idea behind what we're doing, and it's lots of steps. It's busy. I've got a newborn baby in our house right now, so got a lot of irons in the fire right now, and then trying to work full time can be a handful sometimes. So. Okay, Luke, if you want to can you go to the next, or can I go to the next thing here? Perfect. Okay, I got it. Okay, so this is I've got some pictures here of this is my rented pasture, and we got real lucky here too because my first cousin, bought a farm and had some pasture on that his grandpa had raised cattle on for years before he bought the farm. Well, the pasture was sitting idle and not really generating any income for him. So we talked, and the fences were in pretty tough shape. And so he signed up for the EQIP program in Floyd County and was approved for a pasture system. And he was willing to spend some money on fence and on some waters and on some seeding and different things, and helped kind of put some infrastructure back into his farm, and then rented those acres to me. And that was really nice because I have a great landlord that keeps the rent down for me, and he's willing to put some money into this farm because this is where he lives too. So. And he's just glad to be able to generate some income on this. So as you can see here, this is part of the pasture right here. And the thing I talked about here, getting creative, you can see this little this metal kind of box, so to speak, there. I had an opportunity to get my hands on a few of these agricultural tanks that they usually have a plastic bladder that sits inside of those. And after looking at the Premier website, I seen their hay feeders, and I thought, heck, I don't need to buy a $200 Premier hay feeder when I can just take the bladder out of this and I can throw my hay into that bunk there, and the sheep have to kind of pick at it and they don't waste it. And that was free. So when I say get creative, look for opportunities like that as you go. In my line of work, I see a lot of things that a lot of different farmers do, and that's a real benefit of my job, is that I get to see that because it gives me ideas on my own farm. And so take examples from other people and save money wherever you can. Here too, again, this is a simple, kind of design. Fortunately, I got to design kind of this grazing system kind of how I wanted it when they put it in. And one of the things you can see here is our water tank was we piped water from the well out to these two paddocks, and we built the fence so that we could water out of both sides of those paddocks. And that way then we weren't moving water tanks and having to run garden hoses and things like that. So that was kind of a handy thing to do. This particular tank does not have a heater in it, and we drain it in the wintertime because we don't typically have any livestock on this farm over the winter. There's the fence that we put in. Because we've got sheep, we put in the woven wire with single strand barbed wire. The cost share rates on the fence were, I would say of all the components of the grazing system, the fence I think is a little low. I think when we were looking at the numbers, that was what probably cost the most out of pocket when we were all said and done, and where there was the most expense and the most work, because it's an extremely dry year, and trying to drill with a post hole auger and fence posts on this ground was almost impossible. We were shearing pins constantly. It would take us up to an hour sometimes to even get 3 feet down into the ground. So it was a tough year for building fence, but we got it done, and hopefully it lasts a long time. There's just some other shots there of the pasture, and these paddocks. This is only a 4.5 acre pasture, and we've got it divided into 4 paddocks. So, and then we have a feedlot that we can use as well. So we're making the most of what we've got here, and then always trying to keep our grazing heights, anywhere. This year was tough, but typically in the 4-inch range, 4 to 6 if we can. This year, like I said, with the drought, it's a little tougher to keep that in some places, but we did the best we could. And there's our lot, and we actually got this open right now because we were working on some stuff and we had the fence down. But you can see that water tank there goes into the lot, and we did put a heated tank in there so that way we have power, and if we did decide to have some livestock in this lot over the winter, we would have access to that. We also used a combination drinker because we didn't know if we'd have cattle or sheep eventually. So we used a combination drinker that would work for both species. There's my sheep. This is at my farm that I've just bought, and there's my sheep right there in the background. Kind of hard to see because they weren't too photogenic when I was taking the pictures. But searching out new feed sources. We're talking about drought, and that's kind of the big thing that we're dealing with right now, especially as grazers. And you start to look for different things, and what can I find? What's low-cost feed solutions? Because frankly, $7 to $8 corn out of the elevator right now is not a very profitable way to feed livestock. Some of the things that I've done on my farm, I've worked with the local elevator. They've got corn screenings that they use when they're cleaning out the bins and the dryers. I buy that for 65% of the cost of corn. And the guy that works at the elevator, he typically will call me when he gets a wagon full. And if I have capacity in my bulk bins or I have room available, I will go pick it up and bring it home. He doesn't have it available all the time, so I typically get as much as I can when I can. Also, this year I had the opportunity. I got a neighbor that has a corn maze, and she raised pumpkins this year, and she told me that she had all these pumpkins and she didn't know what she was going to do with them because she couldn't get them sold. And she was just going to end up giving them away. And she said, in fact, she told me she was going to dig a hole and just bury them in a hole. And I told her, don't do that. I said, I'll find the use for them. So she brought me over a trailer with 350 pumpkins on it. And we have been actually feeding pigs, sheep, and some deer in our food plots with these pumpkins that basically were just wasted. And I got that for free. And they were, the sheep seemed to eat it. The hogs seemed to eat it. Doesn't seem to bother them. They actually like it, and they don't last very long. So she also had some corn shocks and stuff that she was selling there as kind of a decorative thing. Well, once the season was kind of past for that, I just brought home bundles of corn stalks and just threw them out there, and it still had the corn attached and everything, and the sheep ate it. And it gets me a few days of feed. Here and there, whatever I can do to save money on my feed costs, that's what I'm trying to do. So always be looking to search out new feed sources, and especially in the drought. There's just not as much forage available on my ground as, years where we had a little more abundant rain. There's just a kind of a look at some of my paddocks here. What I was really fortunate too when I bought this farm already had this all divided up into paddocks because the guy that lived there before me had miniature horses. And so it worked perfect for sheep because he had the fencing and everything in place, and I really haven't had to do a whole lot other than, scrounge up a few gates. There's another one of my feeders, and I got that inside. Anywhere you can, like I said, you can find these low-cost solutions to help your bottom line is a positive when it comes to saving money and generating, extra income for yourself. This is the inside of my barn. This is another cool thing because it's like sometimes maybe this place was just meant to be for us because this guy had all these little stalls for all of his miniature horses. I think I ended up with like 11 or 12 stalls in my barn, and it's perfect because when my ewes start to lamb, I've already got kind of my jugs built inside of my shed. I don't really have to like build that stuff. So I was really lucky from that standpoint to have that available to me. Take advantage of program opportunities. This is one opportunity here. Kind of a tough picture to see, but we had an opportunity this year through, if you had CRP, which 72 acres of this farm that I bought is in CRP till 2015, but they had an opportunity where you could pay back 10% of your payment and you could cut or harvest hay on like half the acres. And so we actually had, I sold some hay off of those acres. There was no restrictions on selling hay. So we cut and baled about 17 or 18 acres of CRP grass, and I sold a fair share of it to a cattle feedlot that's not very far away. And I also kept back some large round bales just for my ewes because, as we get through winter and forage needs, I'm going to need more hay. And right now, if you haven't looked, the price of hay is sky high. And I think Dan will kind of attest to that because I think he kind of keeps a close watch on the hay markets. And so anywhere you can find these kind of opportunities and pay attention to what's going on, this is a drought-driven opportunity because normally in a normal year you wouldn't be able to do this. But this year it worked out okay for me. And there's some of my pigs. I just thought I'd throw them in there because they're in the shed too right now because they're part of our Big River Meat Company. Those pigs will be, 3 of those pigs I've got sold. The other 2 will be going in a little bit later for retail cuts of meat and be sold off the farm. And we've gotten quite a few orders for bacon, pork chops, some of that kind of stuff, pork loin. So we're going to be, eventually taking those to market. Those 3 hogs in the front there, they'll be going here probably in the next few weeks. So. And there, there's another good opportunity there. We had a guy that has pigs that typically he's got a confinement building. And this is the other thing too. Keep in mind, we're mostly small farmers. We kind of believe in small farmers. Some of us here have a bad or poor opinion of confinement buildings or big operations, but don't overlook that as an opportunity sometimes because those people sometimes have things to offer you. And then, as the case in my pigs, we had a guy that has a confinement building. But he can't use belly ruptured pigs. Well, there's nothing wrong with a belly ruptured pig other than the fact that the big companies that pack pork don't want belly ruptured pigs. A lot of times, a lot of those big companies will just shoot them in the head or just destroy them because they don't want them. Well, this particular guy said, well, you can just have them because they're worthless. And so, to me, that's an opportunity. So we thought, hey, we can take those pigs to our farm, we can raise them, and we can resell those pigs. And again, there's nothing wrong with them; they're perfectly fine. It's they're just they're kind of like a dented can in the grocery store. They usually discount them because they're not worth the full value of whatever. But we're raising them. We like them. They're growing good for us, and we're real satisfied with them. So. And then I just threw in a picture here too. We also row crop a few acres. Right now we're conventionally farming. It's only like 13.5 acres. We're working on maybe getting another 17.5 acres rented. But so we're corn bean right now. I've also on a 4-acre piece I actually seeded a cover crop this year in the hopes that maybe I'll be able to either hay or chop some of that and use it as feed and then go back into either corn or soybeans. So that's kind of what our operation is. That's kind of what we're doing. And, there's a lot of opportunity out there for people if you just want to, like I said, just kind of look around and get creative and find things that you can do that'll make you some money down the road.
All right, excellent. We'll now transition to Dan for his introduction and then discussion of key learning outcomes from Jay.
Yeah, well, I hope everybody can hear me. My name's Dan Specht. I farm in the northeast corner of Iowa. McGregor is right across the Mississippi River from Prairie to Sheen, Wisconsin. So I'm close to Wisconsin. I'm also about 30 miles away from Minnesota. And a little bit about my part of the state. We're a little different than the rest of the state. We're a up in the we're in karst topography with a limestone influence. Think of a small layer of dirt on top of a huge layer of rock, and that's where we live. There's about the ridge tops run level out into northern Iowa, north central Iowa, but we have very deep, narrow valleys. The ridge tops are at about 1,100 to 1,200 feet, and the Mississippi River level is 625 feet above sea level, so there's around a 500 foot of elevation in the hills. There's a picture right there that kind of shows the ridge top behind. It drops down a bit out to this field, and then on either side there's a deep ravine that you're within 2 miles of the Mississippi River right in this picture here. So while this picture's up, I could talk about my main program is conception to consumption of grass-fed beef, and I have a Red Angus based cow herd, and I'm breeding using Red Devon bulls, and I feel that makes a really good cross for grass finished beef. I think the Devon breed is similar in beef to what the Berkshire hogs are in pork. Meat quality is a main component. Large percentage of my land is either permanent pasture or cropland that's not really suitable for continuous row cropping. My land is all rated highly erodible. That doesn't stop my neighbors from growing continuous corn and even some soybeans in these hills, but I feel that the best use of my land is in permanent vegetative cover, perennial cover, and I grow mainly cool season grasses with red clover, birdsfoot trefoil, and alfalfa for legumes. Grazing is similar to any other kind of farming. It's all about soil quality and maintaining or improving soil quality. Grazing management with a good rotational system helps maintain that, and I also try to add composted manures whenever possible. I guess I have a confession to make talking about dealing with drought on my particular farm. I came close to dealing with drought, but I think I got just enough rain just in time, and I could go just about any direction from where I live, and it was too little too late. I know much of southern Wisconsin had a devastating drought this year, and you go south, especially south into eastern Iowa and western Illinois, they also were very, very dry. And it was spotty even in my own neighborhood. I farm about 8 miles east of Monona, and I also have a farm in Alamakee County that is about 3 miles north of Monona, and I got about 5 inches less rain during the growing season on the farm north of Monona than I did at home. I was lucky Memorial Day weekend. I thought we were going to get through the weekend without any rain, and then on the last day of May, first day of June, we had a 3-inch overnight soaker that just was wonderful. And then also in the middle of July, the same thing happened. We got over a 10-day period, we got over 5 inches of rain that not very many other people got. And if you look on the NOAA weather site, observe precipitation, and go to the look at the last 60 days, why there's a streak goes spotty across Iowa, but up into northeast Iowa, we're in one of the few places that actually is above normal precip for the last 60 days. So we had some very long, hot, dry spells, but I guess I didn't really suffer the extreme drought that many people did, and I'm thankful for that. But maybe that gives me a little bit better perspective on where we're at, and without being too emotional about it, because I'm not suffering quite as much as a lot of people did. So how am I dealing with drought this year, or my extreme dry spells that I had? In addition to grazing, I'm building up my beef herd to about 85 pregnant and nursing cows that calve mainly in the fall, mainly in September. And this year I had also calved August and September and October. I do that because I feel when I leave the calves on the cows through the winter, and I turn them back out in the spring for spring flush, and they are both the cows and the calves are very, very good grazers when the calf is 6 months old, and the cows, when they get back on grass, they really pick back up in milk. And I don't wean the calves until the cow is a month to 6 weeks away from having another calf. This gives calves, I get about, I just normally overwinter the yearlings, and then I can finish them easily the next summer as full-size slaughter animals when they're nearing 2 years old, plus or minus a month or two. And that's what I've been doing for the last several years, and I've found that it works pretty well. I just a little bit about my marketing. I am either trying to directly market my meat or sell live animals to folks that do marketing of their own. I have a customer in Minnesota that buys my finished animals, and they end up going into the new generation of food co-ops around the edges of the Twin Cities. In my own direct marketing, I've been zeroing in on working with a couple of my PFI friends that have CSAs, and I market my meat to their members, and that has also worked very well. I just have to send emails about the availability and timing and try to mesh that with the CSA pickups, and I'm basically doing averaging a delivery every month or so. And to my CSA customers, my main unit of sale is a 20-pound bundle. I try to divide up the whole animal into 20-pound boxes, and that way I don't have piles of whatever, steaks, hamburger, soup bones left over. I try to get rid of the whole animal that way, and that also has worked very well, and it allows me to, I think, keep my prices reasonable and my customers happy, which is what it's all about. I talked a little bit about this year's weather, and where we're at in forage availability. We were northeast corner of Iowa was very fortunate all winter long. Well, not all winter, but in January we were lucky to get pretty good snow cover that actually stuck with us for about 6 weeks. We had up to 12 to 14 inch good snow cover in our woods. Not a lot of people had that, I realize. Even you go north into Minnesota and western Wisconsin, they were abnormally free of snow this winter, but we had a 6-week-long snowmobile season. And that was followed by an extreme warm March. I think, what was it, about one of the first weekends in March, it got up into the mid-70s. And actually we did a nice couple of friends took a little canoe trip on the Turkey River in early in March, and actually did it in t-shirts. It was unbelievable. And that warm March weather allowed us to I stopped winter feeding on April 1st, which is on average a whole month early. So I have hay left over from last winter yet, which is a luxury I've never experienced before. I usually end up buying some hay, but this year I'm lucky.
Dan,
Yes.
have you had to or have you in the past ever had too much forage available that you could go out and do some stockpiling and do some haying on some of your pastures? I know you said you had quite a few acres of pasture. I just wondered if you had done that before.
Oh, sure. My pastures and hay fields are somewhat interchangeable. I usually end up grazing all my hay fields and sometimes hay some of my pastures, even some of the pretty steep ones. This year I kind of was looking for a bumper year of grazing, and I've been bumping up my numbers, and I also do custom grazing. I have a brother that's a dairy farmer, and I had up to 50 of his bred heifers at a time out during April, May, and June. So I also like to graze off my hay fields early to delay their maturity, so I don't own my own baling equipment, and all the custom balers are very, very busy at the same time. All the dairy farmers want to make their hay early, and by grazing my hay fields off in early May, early to mid-May, I do a number of things. It's friendly for ground nesting birds, for one thing, because then they can be undisturbed during their real prime nesting times, and I can delay my hay making till the very end of June or early July and still have quality hay. And it was a little bit iffy this year because of the lack of moisture, but with the good rainfall we had in early July, I was able to get 2 cuttings off of my primary ridgetop hay fields that have a considerable amount of alfalfa in them. In the second crop, alfalfa was just about the only thing that was doing a whole lot of growing. So, but no, I do make hay off of pastures if it's getting away from me, but I also realize that I would like to, if I want to build up my soil, if you have hay that's getting away from you, another thing you can do is mob up your cattle numbers and move them densely but rapidly through your paddocks, and this will give you let them cream off the quality grazing and do very well with their grazing, but also feed your soil and provide a mulch and give you a lot more grass growth through the summer when if you'd make hay, your ground surface would heat up and dry off and growth would stop. So I try to do some of both, but I also try to have my own hay for through the winter. Like you said, there are a lot of hay auctions available in my neighborhood. Walk On has a weekly hay auction. Fort Atkinson has a weekly hay auction. Edgewood, Dyersville. So there is hay available, but a lot of it, especially the high quality dairy hay, is being exported out of the region. And I think there's one of the main reasons that hay is so short this year is just as much because of market forces and government program incentives to grow row crops. There's less and less hay being made every year, so on fewer and fewer acres. So hay is very expensive this year. My brother is a dairy farmer. He's buying mixed medium to good quality hay for around $250 a ton. And I don't think I could buy very good hay for a whole lot less than that.
I think even the CRP hay, what I seen the other day, was $125 a bale for a big bale.
Yeah, that's probably
which is a higher price than what I sold mine for this summer. So
yeah, that's getting that brings up other strategies that grazers should have, and that's flexibility of numbers. One thing I did this year was my fall grazing. After that July, I didn't get hardly any rain in August or the first half of September, and I did not have much fall growth as normal in my cool season pastures, particularly in the farm north of Monona that got 5 inches less rain. So I had a chance to graze more Holstein heifers, but I turned that opportunity down, and I decided to make second crop of hay off of my hay fields instead of grazing them. And I could see my grass pastures weren't growing as much as I expected. And then another thing to
Sorry, folks. Looks like we lost Dan. I'm sure he'll jump back on. I'm going to give him a call on his cell phone. And Jay, if you want to visit about some of your thoughts,
I can
go ahead.
Yeah, that there was a couple of questions here. No, one of the questions is looking at the bedding. Do I have any experience with shredded paper? I do not have experience with shredded paper. If I had a source for that, I would definitely be using it if I could get it, because again, I've gotten to be really good at picking up freebies wherever I can get them. And so if I had a source for that, yes, I would definitely use shredded paper. One thing about the farm that I bought, actually, the reason there's straw, you actually see some oat straw there in the picture with my pigs. Part of that is that the guy that left the farm, he left a whole stack of it there, so I've just kind of been using that because it's all in pretty good shape yet. So, other than that, one of the things too, I guess, I'm here talking as a beginning farmer and with Practical Farmers of Iowa, but I do want to kind of put a plug in for the NRCS and things that are available. If you're looking at grazing type things, if you're looking at better utilization of forages, the NRCS has a number of experts that can help you with that have a lot of training, a lot of experience with other farms. stop into your local office. Every state and every county around has got one, or a regional office or whatever. You can find people available to help you with some of those questions. There's also some nice funding opportunities there for everything from water tanks to pipeline to fencing to just anything, like wells, any components you can think of. So you can just check into that. That's available. There's low interest loans available through the state of Iowa if you're working in this state. I'm not sure about other states, but there's loans that they'll work through your local bank and lock in interest at no more than 3% for projects such as grazing systems or cattle facilities or manure stacking pads or composting facilities for your livestock if you needed something like that. So definitely check that stuff out. It's available, and take advantage of it. One thing that we're going to do on our farm this coming year, we've applied we're thinking about putting up a high tunnel. And not that we really are crazy about getting into vegetable production, but from our standpoint, we're looking at it for food for our own family. We're trying to get we're slowly working towards self-sufficiency so that we're able to feed ourselves off of our own farm. And there's so much stuff you hear in the news today about different things, food safety and all kinds of crazy things. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a person that only eats organic or doesn't eat meat or anything like that. But my wife and I just feel it's important that that we be able to raise a lot of the stuff that we eat, because we have land now available for us to do that. And we think it's also important to teach our son the same thing, that that he doesn't really need to have to rely on anyone else to get his food. We just think that's a real important message to teach our kid. And so, we're looking at that, and there are incentives available also for that to help do those kinds of things, to put up high tunnels and to work through that. So that's what we're looking at doing, kind of as we expand our operation in the future. My wife's taken some classes on canning, and so we're just, trying to get back to, some of our roots, some of the older days, and some things that we can kind of control ourselves. So, I'm looking here, trying to think what else that I'm missing here. Beginning Farmer Loan Program, I could talk a little bit about that. That program, if you haven't had any experience with that through the Farm Service Agency, the first thing is figure out who your loan officer is, and then sit down and talk to them and relay your goals, maybe a business plan on what you're trying to do and why you want to farm. The biggest thing with that program is that you have to have 3 years filed on your Schedule F for your taxes. And the reason they do that is it can be kind of a hurdle for some people, but the reason they do that is that they don't want they want somebody that's serious about actually wanting to getting into farming. They don't want somebody that just maybe buying the farm for the wrong reasons or makes too much money and they just want a low interest rate. They want to kind of glean out those people that are really serious, and they also want to make sure you have the management skills that for success. So I've heard people say, geez, it's such a pain in the butt to have to get that 3 years of Schedule F, but it's more of a tactic to make sure that you get a plan in place, you're going in the right direction, and you have the skills to handle a farming operation. We also have used the operating loan through Farm Service Agency, which is really great interest rates, and it's really nice to help you get yourself going and establish kind of a relationship with your banker through FSA. So definitely check those things out. And then anything else that you can that you can kind of find and look for, just keep your eyes open. There's as I talked before, big farmers, they typically waste a lot. You can find a lot of things that they would throw away that I would still use, that I can make work. I just the other day I was at a farm, and I had a guy tell me that he was going to scrap all of his old hog feeders. Well, I looked over these hog feeders, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with them, and he said he just didn't have a use for them anymore. He wasn't raising livestock. He didn't want them, so he gave them to me. So, drive around the countryside, look for places, that got some old farm machinery, and stop in and just talk to people, because a lot of times, a lot of those people are looking to just get rid of that stuff. They have no use for gates anymore or hog feeders. And if you have a niche market and a place you can use that stuff, why buy it if somebody's going to give it to you for free? So, Just keep your eyes open and pay attention for those kinds of things and opportunities that exist. Luke, are you having any luck getting Dan back? You must be on the phone with him. Is there any more questions for me that I could answer for people that maybe I haven't talked
Jay,
about?
we're back. I got Dan on another line. Turns out his computer lost its battery, so we're just going to have him pipe through my mic through my speakerphone on my cell phone. Go ahead, Dan.
Perfect.
Can you hear us?
Okay, yeah. If everybody can hear me, I'll talk loud, and I guess I'm ready to answer questions. If that's where we're at in the program now.
Dan, I got a few more questions for you, I guess, that I had kind of written down here. Have you seeded down any additional acres of your crop land that, in preparation for the drought or preparing for more forage, or would you say you're pretty much the same as you were last year?
Sorry, I've got to repeat the question. Did you seed down any more hay Did you seed down any more hay this year than you did last year?
I seeded. I'm kind of phasing out of row crops, but I seeded down about a 27-acre patch of new seeding with oats, and I made hay out of my oats, and I didn't get as big a crop as I hoped to, but I'm sure glad I got what I got. And my new seeding, I normally, especially if you take oats off as a forage crop, you get a seeding crop of hay, but that did not materialize this year. I guess I'm lucky that my alfalfa looks like it's still alive in my other new seeding plants, but there wasn't enough to mow for hay. So I know I think the Iowa report estimate there was a 40% loss in forage yields, and I'm guessing that that's probably about right for me, or maybe even a little bit more, because a lot of my forage production is on steep, thin soils without alfalfa. Deep soils with alfalfa produce very well, but thinner soils ran out of juice.
And then also, Dan, I'm wondering, are you using any corn stalks as part of your feeding plan? Are you baling any corn stalks and feeding that, or are you grazing stalks or anything like that?
I guess I didn't quite hear all that question, but the question is, I think I heard whether I am able to graze corn stalks, and not really too practical for me. I still have one third crop hayfield that I am going to be able to graze, and I hope that lasts me for another 10 days to 2 weeks with my main herd. And after that, usually we in northeast Iowa, we don't ever expect to go too much further than that into the winter, because my part of the world has very dependable snow cover, and usually our snow is too deep to graze through. Whether that develops this year or not, I don't know, but I never depend on grazing after the early December.
Luke, I noticed there's a couple of questions over here on the chat board. Do you want to ask those of
Dan, what
Dan?
time of year do you calve?
I calve in the fall, mid-August through October, with a few odd ones on into November, I guess, but mainly September, in August, late August, September.
And with the weather being so dry, are you doing any keyline plowing?
No, I let my night crawlers and deep-rooted perennials do that, I guess. I haven't ever, I don't think my land, my soils, I have lush soils and pretty deep clay subsoils, and I don't feel that I have compacted layers that are an issue.
On water availability, Dan, you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing as far as moving water around your farm? Are you using creeks to graze, or for your cattle to drink out of? Are you using water tanks? What's kind of your plan, and is that going to change with the drought?
I mainly pipe water out to my different paddocks. One farm, I have my well is kind of on a high point in the ridge top, and I'm able to use gravity. I have up to, I guess I got it, the one line runs out almost 4,000 feet. I kind of got a long, skinny hogback ridge that I'm on. And my other farm north of Monona that I rent, I've been able to get an organic equip grant, and 2 years ago I finished that project, and that's enabled me to do a much more efficient job of grazing. Like, cattle do not have to walk as far to come back for water, and that was huge this year. Another thing I was able to utilize this year was a lot of my paddocks have access to shade. The majority of them do. And I really think that was important this year to allow cattle to get out of the sun. Another thing that goes along with my fall calving that makes it work for me, I think, is my terrain, my deeper valleys, and a lot of woody cover is when I don't confine the animals, they can always find a place to get out of the wind, which allows even late calves to do pretty well in the winter. Even the other thing I have in the winter is I used to raise hogs for Organic Valley, and I have hoop houses that I used to use for hogs that I now use for hay storage, but I do allow cattle to get into them on especially cold rains. That's one of the hardest thing on small animals in the winter. So I think not everybody can make fall calving work where you nurse the calves through the winter. You have to be able to have good wind shelter, and I think you have to be able to keep them out of cold rain.
Have you seen an increase in bare soil this year because of the dry weather?
I try to keep a mulch on my soils, but modern haymaking equipment, the big rakes with they pretty much scrape that residue off. So I haven't really taken it down to the. I do think it will be a good year for dormant seeding of clover, so I'm planning on doing some of that, either yet this fall or early next spring. A little bit about how I do that, I guess. I like to broadcast in commercial fertilizer spreaders, and my local seed and fertilizer the couple that I work with have keep pelleted lime on hand, and I just take my seed down to the fertilizer blender, and they scoop in the amount of pelleted lime into the blender, and I dump the whatever seeds. If I seed new seeding that way too. You can put grass seed, lightweight grass, fluffy seed, and lime pellet seed to mix it all in and keep it evenly distributed when I spread it. And pelleted lime is a real good thing to put out with legume seeds. So I think that's a good combination.
Excellent. Jay, I'll ask you if you had some other learning outcomes you wanted to hit on about drought recovery grazing and.
I think those are the big things I touched on mostly here. I guess from a standpoint of next year, and I think you might have touched on this a little bit, but maybe you want to reiterate it. Have you started making preparations, Dan, as far as getting ready for next year, and planning for dry weather next year? I mean, what steps are you taking, if any, or what thoughts have you given to it?
Well, I think I heard most of that. Like I said, the last 60 days I've been above normal in precipitation, so I actually am in pretty good shape in my soil profile right now. But if it does happen again, which is probably pretty likely, I plan on doing more of the same. I guess monitor my numbers and be flexible. But main thing is keep building up soil and keep my legumes up and keep knocking back. One problem I do have is with shady edges. I get a lot of invasive brush. I get a lot of multiflora rose and honeysuckle, and I have to keep battling those all the time. So keep that up is going to help me be more productive. Like I said, I plan on doing some cross seeding or fall dormant seeding of red clover and white clovers. And another thing that I do is feed my hay unless it's really, really windy, and I can't. I like to feed the hay out into where they're manuring and putting the nutrients back out into my pastures and hay fields through the winter. That's a really good soil building process that I try to do as much of as I can.
A couple questions from the chat box I think we'll take now. What's the daily weight gain you typically get on the beef you raise grass-fed?
Well, if I'm selling my cattle when they're near 2 years old and they weigh 1,150 pounds, you can just divide 2 years worth of days minus 75, 80 pounds birth weight. So, that's the calculation, and I'm averaging, well over 1.5 pounds a day. And I think maybe I'm doing a little better than that in spurts through the summer, especially with my big Devon steers now. I think they did a little bit better than that, but that's what I shoot for, is if you can get that 1.5 pounds through their lifetime, they're going to be tender and juicy and highly in demand.
I'd like to have animals that have some, fat on them when I butcher them. They don't have to be fat like grain-fed animals where there's a lot of trim loss because of the fat, but they need to have some fat on them to meet, so the meat doesn't dry out when you cook.
There's a question about a specific kind of pasture planting. Do you have any experience with something called Saint? I probably am saying that wrong. SAINFOIN?
No, I don't. I think that's I'm not sure where that legume comes from, but it's in the I think the Lespedeza family, and I don't have any experience. I do have some experience with seeding native legumes, and I'm doing some experimenting with prairie restoration and seeding warm season native prairies that I haven't done much grazing on yet, but it takes about 3 years to build the root system and really thicken up a good stand of native forbs and grasses, and you have to have there's a lot of tricks to getting that done right, I think, and I'm learning a few things about that. I really think you have to have the right inoculants when you're seeding native legumes. The bacterial inoculants don't live forever in the soil, and even though all these wonderful legumes were a part of the ecology and were all over our soils, when they've been farmed for over 100 years, those you're going to have to re-inoculate, and I think their researchers have to be doing more work on that. And,
Quick question about goats. Have you ever thought about adding goats to your grazing rotation to take care of the multiflora and the honeysuckle?
yeah, I have actually. I've got a neighbor that Scott Cater has a nice herd of goats, and I've been talking to him about it a little bit. The fencing scares me a little bit, but I do have the water and the electricity, so if we get together on figuring out portable netting that we can move around. And another problem I have is black locusts, or an issue. I don't know if it's a problem or not, because they make wonderful durable fence posts, but I would like to get some of that country land back that they've spread out onto, and I'm thinking that goats would be really, really useful for trimming back the resprouted roots. I don't know how good they are with roses. I imagine they're a whole lot better than cattle. Honeysuckles, I don't know if anything eats, but maybe goats would browse them.
About how much recovery time are you giving your pastures during the droughts?
That's a real good question. I'm trying to increase my recovery time and my grazing height. And this year, you could increase your grazing time a lot without increasing your grazing height at all. But I try to between 30 and 40 days is what I've been doing, and I could easily lengthen that out. Or not easily, but that's been working for me. I've done that for years, and it seems sustainable. And a 40-day recovery still allows me to get 4 to 5 grazings in a year. So,
interesting.
A little bit longer when people used to, folks in our grazing group up in, I'm a member of the Northeast Iowa Grazers, and we have an awful lot of dairy farmers that rotationally graze in our part of the world, and they've found that big increases in moderately increasing their intervals. They found there's more energy. They lose the real high lushness, but they find there's more energy and a little more bulk, and it's not as washy. So animal performance has been much better when you can get a little bit taller and a little bit higher energy and not quite so high protein.
Back in 2010, you held a field day, and that's where I pulled all these photos from for the slideshow we're showing right now, and folks are wondering what time of year that was. Do you remember what time of year? Was it July?
I believe it was in July. Yep. That was orchard grass, and they'd been probably in it already. Orchard grass and bird's foot trefoil. It's pretty complex. It's been sod for a long, long time. So I think that was in July, and I think that was probably the third time through, and it was real yellow with bird's foot trefoil blossoms before they got in, but that's the first thing they eat when they go in there, so yeah.
Do you graze the cows, steers, bulls, and calves all together, or do you have separate groupings?
I've done it. I do have all those classes together, but I also mainly have my yearlings on a separate, what I call my finishing farm, and I try to push them a little bit harder. But the way I take care of my cows with my fall calving cows, I think they need pretty good nutrition all through the year. So they're nursing in the winter, and in the summer they're gestating a big calf, plus nursing last year's calf yet, so they need good feed. So it does work to have all classes together, but my being 12 miles apart, it's not easy, not practical or easy. I would like to be able to keep them in all one group, but I pretty much have to divide it into two bunches. So that's the way I've been dividing it.
Did you want to ask Jay any other questions about his specific setup, his system of some crops on that small few acres, and then grazing and setting up fences and things, and any questions you wanted to ask him?
I guess if he's considering in his corn and soybean rotation, if he could somehow get some cover crops, throw some turnips out there in early August or something, and then would he be able to graze in this time of the year, graze his cropland?
That's something that we're kind of working towards. I was at the Practical Farmers of Iowa conference last year, and I listened in on the cover crop sessions that they held there, and had a chance after the sessions to speak to some of the people that had quite a bit of background in the cover crop kind of arena, so to speak. And I spent a little time talking to them, and one of the things that they had recommended was starting slow with the cover crops, because they said that, what happens is people sometimes dive in head first, and then, we get a real wet spring and they can't get their crops in, and then all of a sudden they're blaming the cover crop and they don't want to do it anymore. And so I'm trying to slowly incorporate that in, but my plans are is to eventually get to the point where I'm running a cover crop every year, because I have the grazing animals available. And if I can get in early enough, like this year, we were able to harvest fairly early. As you know, Dan, in our part of the world, cover crops can be a little challenging, because sometimes if we can't get in and get those crops out soon enough, we don't get a whole lot of fall growth. If you go to like an aerial seeding or something like that, but at this point I really don't, I don't have very many acres, so it's kind of hard for me to justify hiring a plane to aerial seed my cover crops, unless I had some other neighbors that were really into it. And I'll be real honest, other than some of my dairy farmer neighbors that I have here in Floyd County, we just people here have not really, I guess, gone crazy on the cover crops. I think if I get a little further east, it seems like I'm seeing a few more. And I did talk to my local seed salesman, and he did tell me that normally he runs through about 1,800 bags of winter rye in a typical year. And he said this year he was up to 5,000 bags sold. So he said he'd seen quite a bit of jump. But I think everything was just a little further east of here, and I think a lot of it was because of chopped acres. But yes, long term, I would love to go to cover crops because, like I said, that would stretch my grazing out for me, would give me a little longer time frame to work with. So, that's something I definitely have considered.
Well, I'd have a suggestion. Maybe just if you could get a hold of one of those walker spinner that you kind of hold on your chest and spin around. The turnip seeds are really, really small, and you only need to put about 2 pounds of them on an acre, and it really wouldn't take too long to walk through soybeans when your leaves are starting to yellow just before they drop off, or same thing with rye and hairy vetch. And then, like you said, with grazing animals, it's a big advantage to take that pressure off of your pasture for a while in May and graze those cover crops and let your pastures get a little bit taller. That's one way to get taller grazing, is to find more acres to graze early in the year. So,
did you want to respond to that, Jay?
One other strategy that I guess I've been toying with, and I don't know how well it will work or not. I've already had one kind of person offer it, but I've been actually, because I have about 24, 25 ewes, and one thing I've been looking at too, and fencing is a big question, but looking at some of these people with maybe like old building sites or a grove that's kind of an oak savanna grove that may be behind the house that these people no longer have grazing animals. I've been looking at talking to some people, and I always am keeping my eye open for those kinds of opportunities around my neighborhood where maybe I could move my sheep in there for possibly a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe of grazing, clean that up, and just give my pastures at home a little more rest. That's something that I've kind of been looking at doing too. In our neighborhood, we don't really have a whole lot of abandoned building sites anymore because we have a large population of Mennonites moving in from Pennsylvania, and a lot of those old building sites have been bought up, and so it gets to be a little more of a challenge to do that. But yeah, that's one other way that I've thought about maybe possibly doing it. Low cost solution to find a few more acres to graze on. So.
Did you have a response to that, Dan, or I had a question from the chat box I could give you?
That sounds like a wonderful idea. I've got a friend in south of Monona that's got a fairly big ewe flock, and he does a lot of that. Keeps them in little people's groves, and instead of somebody having to maintain mowing, why he doesn't get charged much at all, if anything, to keep some of his sheep on a lot of different farmsteads. So that's a wonderful idea.
Dan,
especially for sheep.
Do you do delayed band castration to get the testosterone growth in your bulls before they become steers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do. I've had some bad luck with my delaying castration, especially using a bander with my fall calving. That would mean doing it during fly season in summer, and I've had some trouble with tetanus. I guess if I would give tetanus shots, maybe I could try it again. But I've been delaying my castration, but I've been doing it with my vets, running them through a chute and cutting them with a knife. So, but I do it when they're probably at least 9 months old. give them a little bit of extra muscling, I think.
Thank you, Dan. Folks, we've got about 10 minutes left. If there's any more questions you want to ask about your setup or your farm. And Jay, if you had any other things you wanted to ask, there's still some time left.
Dan, I'd like to, could you give me some of your background a little bit in your, it sounds like you do some private sales and stuff through your herd. Do you market all your animals that way privately, or would you say that you've got some are you taking any animals to the sale barn and moving them or not?
I try not to. That was a big reason I got involved with Organic Valley, and about the only thing I've actually marketed through a sale barn in the last several years is some of my cull cows. And other than that, I have been successfully negotiating private sales to different grass-fed markets, or I sell halves and quarters, and now I'm selling a lot of 20-pound boxes. And I go through the Edgewood locker with those animals and get them federally inspected, so I can sell across state lines too. I do have a new market I'm working on up in the Twin Cities. I've got a friend that's with the National Audubon Society, and he's working on the Upper Mississippi program with the National Audubon Society, and we're working on a bird-friendly label. And that may turn into a pretty good market for me. He's also has a list of people that he helps find meat for, and I sold. I direct marketed my first animal through him, and I'm planning on doing quite a bit more of that. But the CSAs work really, really well. All those people are already looking for alternative food system, they're tuned into that, and they're willing to listen to what's different about grass-fed versus traditional meats, and I think there's a lot of room for expansion in that direction.
Did you want to mention your open-pollinated corn?
Yeah, well, I had that really nice picture that Tomoko took of, that's my blue and white open-pollinated sweet corn. I've been working with CFI as a project that they got funded with Michael Fields Ag Institute and a few other folks, and breeding corn or breeding crops for organic and non-conventional markets, and I've been involved with Walter Goldstein in developing some open-pollinated, learning how to breed and develop open-pollinated corn lines, and I have a line of high-protein, high-density, high-methionine field corn that's a bright orange color with a white cob that I always think I'm about 1 year away from being able to sell quantities of seed for that. I think I'm in the same place with my blue and white sweet corn. Anybody listening has direct markets through roadside stands or farmers markets or CSAs and is interested in trying some next year, I would have some limited quantities available for some trials. So that's one advantage I have with my with all my steep hillsides and timber. I have isolated fields that I can keep pollen drift at a minimum. So I feel confident that I can produce non-GMO corn.
What's it taste like, Dan?
My sweet corn?
Yeah.
I got Bill Tracy is the sweet corn breeder at University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's one of the few ARS scientist corn breeders that's focusing on sweet corn. But anyway, I got him to sample some this summer. He was at the Seed Savers for a talk, and he got a chance to. He called it meaty.
Meaty.
It's got some kind of filling volume to it. It's sweet, but it's not real sweet. It's got a real good corn flavor. And anyway, it's big, vigorous, tall, hardy corn. It'd be an excellent fodder crop for anybody that has livestock on an acreage that wants to sell some unique sweet corn at a farmer's market and have some forage left over for some animals. It'd be great, because if you plant it into fertile soil, it got up to 9-10 feet tall, big bushy plants. So.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to take a couple minutes and thank our speakers for all their preparation they've done for this tonight, and for sharing so many years of experience, Dan, and really being open and supportive of other people and helping them think about some new ways to be resilient on their farms. And also wanted to thank our funders, great group of funders, including the Federal Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program, which is part of the Farm Bill that we're still waiting for. We need a new Farm Bill now. So if you know anybody that's got power in Washington, tell them that we need a Farm Bill and we need the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program to bring funding to programs like this, the Farminar series. And just all the ones listed there on the side note on the right, John Deere, Cliff Bar, Ag Ventures Alliance, Cedar Tree Foundation, Iowa Department of Ag Land Stewardship, and the USDA RMA Specialty Crops grants as well. So thanks for all the funding, and thank you for the speakers. Jay, do you want to have the last word?
I'll just, like I said, keep working, keep trying, and keep doing different things. I mean, just keep kind of scratching and finding your way through it. Because, like I said, I mean, it's very rewarding, and it's just, I'm glad to be a part of agriculture.
Well, I apologize for letting my battery run down on my computer.
You tried your best. We don't blame you. Thanks, folks, and see you next Tuesday for a new Farminar on poultry with Matt Russell and Patrick Standley and beginning farmer Carla Hansen from Western Iowa.